So, this is, hey Brett. This has been a really long and kind of idea-filled weekend. First, I want to start and just say to thank Constance and Heather and everyone here at WashU for putting on such a really impressive event. I mean, there's been tons to think about. I learned a lot. I don't know what to think about the job I've been given to somehow tie a bow around this. And so, I mean, I've made attempts to do it periodically in pieces throughout, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do it right now. But what I did want to do first was say, I like images, so I'm going to try to end on a high note. So, Brennan, you know, this one's for you. But I will also point out, Petra, I cover up my camera. So it's complicated story. Huh? Yeah, and nothing against images, but, you know, it's a complicated story. So I wanted to start, I said earlier, I wanted to say something about this wall. I mean, I've been staring at this wall of plants for, you know, 48 hours. And it's incredible, and it has really affected a lot of people. One of the things that I've noticed, and one of the things I've noticed, I can't see anymore, and I gotta switch so I can. Better. When I walked into this room, I looked at it and I said, "Is that thing fake?" And I immediately walked up. I'm like, "No, those are actually plants." And at least 6 people over the weekend have said the same thing. "Is that thing fake? We just gotta go check. We gotta go check." And the thing on one level, no, they're real plants. Like you touch them, there's all the rest of it, but it looks fake. And I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean, frankly, for me, making real plants look fake is much more interesting than trying to make fake plants look real. You know, like you get a plastic plant and you put it in your room, like that's not so interesting. But like taking real plants and making them look fake, I think is a real achievement. And I don't say that to be pejorative. What I mean by that is that a better word is maybe artificial. And the root of artificial being artifice, right? That this wall is filled with artifice. It's not natural, right? Plants are supposed to be outside. They're supposed to be on roughly horizontal surfaces. You know, we know that there's an inside. Where's Robert? You know, like who knows what the inside is? But it is not the inside that we normally would get if we encountered these plants out in the world. And so what it does for me anyway, it kind of says something about all architectural materials, that they're all infused with artifice. I think, you know, Nader said something about this last night. You know, but this wall really acts like, I mean, I see shades of Frank Gehry's horse's head in the DZ Bank, or the incredible concrete cylinder at Kahn's library. I see shades of Tony Smith and the big steel cubes. I mean, it operates not at all like nature, and that's what I think makes it incredible. And it makes me think about this floor in an interesting way, because this floor, you know, real oak, is also artificial, right? It is not natural wood. We've been through this, there's no such thing as nature. Natural wood is a tree. By the time this stuff has gotten here, it's been killed, butchered, you know, dried out, cut to fit. I mean, trees are vertical. The floor is horizontal. These are supposed to be horizontal. It's actually vertical. The floor is as pregnant with the artifice that we call architecture as the wall is. And I think that that's really important. You know, I mean, if we think again to Louis Kahn, you know, we all know that sham story about him talking to bricks. I mean, he just talked to a boring brick. That's the thing. I mean, had he asked a more interesting brick, he would have gotten a more interesting answer. And we might have not, you know, had the kind of impasse of this truth to materials sorcery continuing to inflict, you know, to harm us. I mean, if Kahn had asked a tree what it wanted to be, you're not going to find a tree that said, "I want to be a 2x4." You know, it's like asking a cow what it wants to be and saying, I want to be a steak. You know, like it's not natural. And that's what this is about. And that is what we do. And it does have to do with this question of image, because I think that architecture and image are really kind of bound up in one another. And the artifice of architecture is bound up in how we make images. And so I just wanted to close by, I don't normally do this, but I guess I was inspired by yesterday's fairy tale reading. But I wanted to read just a short passage from a piece I wrote for the Venice Biennale, I guess 2 biennales ago, for the catalog for the American Pavilion that was put together by Cynthia Davidson and Monica Ponce de Leon on the architectural imagination, where it turns out I wrote a lot about images, and I don't know if that had, I had sort of forgotten about it, and I was trying to figure out what to say, and I looked at it last night, and I was like, well, I'll just say that. So excuse me if you've read this, but I'm guessing it's old enough that maybe you've forgotten it. But here we go. Architects, like painters and novelists, deal primarily with images, with semblances of things rather than with things themselves. It's easy to forget that the field's central concepts, form and space, refer not to physical entities, but rather to specific disciplinary illusions. Architectural form is irreducible to tangible matter, just as architectural space is irreducible to volumes of air. Rather, architectural form and space are abstractions, virtual doppelgangers of physical entities, figments of the architectural imagination. As abstractions, architectural form and space are suffused with a vitality and dynamism that is unthinkable, except metaphorically, in the physical masses and volumes they represent. In design studio, for example, we routinely stretch, bend, twist, extrude, and otherwise manipulate forms in ways that even the most pliable construction materials could not withstand. Spaces, too, are made to flow, to expand, to penetrate, to intersect, in ways impossible in the physical world. When describing the built environment, professional critics and lay observers alike reflexively speak of buildings that soar, elements in tension with one another, spaces suffused with psychological qualities like serenity, agitation, and frenzy. As the philosopher Suzanne Langer observed, this sort of talk quite simply makes no sense with respect to everyday or scientific, excluding some bits of kind of quantum physics and stuff, understandings of space. But this kind of talk is perfectly appropriate to architectural space. Like, buildings don't actually soar, but when we talk about them and say they soar, you know, we all know what we mean. And this is because architecture, in the specific disciplinary sense that I outlined elsewhere in the paper, does not take place in the physical world we inhabit. Rather, it is in the virtual domain of the architectural imagination that human environments, be they rooms, gardens, buildings, or cities, eclipse their origins in vulgar utility and obtain to the level of art. Langer offers a succinct encapsulation. This is a quote: "The work of art, if it is successful, detaches itself from the rest of the world. Every real work of art has a tendency to appear thus dissociated from its mundane environment. The most immediate impression it creates is one of otherness from reality, the impression of an illusion enfolding the thing, action, statement, or flow of sound that constitutes the work. Even when the elements of representation is absent, where nothing is imitated or feigned, in a lovely textile, a pot, a building, a sonata, this air of illusion, of being a sheer image, exists as forcibly as in the most deceptive picture or the most plausible narrative." That's the end of Langer. For Langer, an image is what an artist creates when she's being creative. It's that simple. And I really like that kind of. In her view, and another quote, "An object becomes an image when it presents itself purely to our vision, that is, as a sheer visual form instead of a locally and practically related object." So there's the relationship between objects and images. Images are virtual. This brand of transcendentalism can be hard to swallow today, And it's particularly difficult to square with the gritty realities of buildings and cities, and we've talked about that criticism a lot over the last 2 days. How, one might ask, given the pressing and acutely real challenges facing contemporary cities and the people that live in them, how can an architect offer abstract images, virtual forms detached from the physical places she has been tasked to improve as a solution? It's an important question, and we've asked it several times. A better question, I posit, is how could we not? Even a cursory survey of the canonical literature on the design of cities demonstrates the centrality of abstract images to the endeavor. Consider, for example, Le Corbusier in The City of Tomorrow and Its Planning, in which he says, "A town is a mighty image which stirs our minds." Or Aldo Rossi in The Architecture of the City. "The urban image, its architecture, invests all of man's inhabited and constructed realms with value." So, to stir our minds, to invest our constructed realms with value, these are the activities for which the discipline of architecture takes responsibility. Of course, such concerns are in no way absolve an architect of her professional obligations. To speak of both a profession and a discipline of architecture, which I did earlier in the text, is not to parse the field into distinct populations of service providers and artists. Rather, these terms denote two sets of contrasting but ultimately complementary cultural concerns. For all her insights into the fundamentally abstract nature of architecture, Suzanne Langer was mistaken in her dismissal of architecture's primary professional motivation, utility, as an affliction. She said that in her book. Rainer Banham, who in response to Langer suggested that a corresponding disciplinary concern for symbolic expression was the affliction of architecture, also got it wrong. Simply put, anyone worthy of the title architect must address the full gamut of the field's professional and disciplinary obligations. We gotta do symbols and we gotta do service. Tipping the balance too far in one direction is detrimental to both ambitions, shirking professional responsibilities. And in this, I hope I'm coming back to some of Igor's points at the very beginning of the morning yesterday. Shirking professional responsibilities quite simply cannot be tolerated. But inattentiveness to the disciplinary project of advancing the public imagination is the more serious concern. For while substandard professionalism can result in the rampant inefficiencies, patent absurdities, and occasionally real dangers that plague our cities, these issues are more easily remedied than the cultural impoverishment that results from sidelining disciplinary concerns. In the best cases, the functional, structural, mechanical, economic, and other obligations administered by the profession attend to our immediate needs so efficiently that our consciousness of those features of the built environment can fall away. This hard-won freedom from quotidian concerns affords our minds the opportunity to slip into the realm of abstract images, for which the discipline takes responsibility. For proof, just return to a favorite place in the city. The concourse of Grand Central Station, the bluffs overlooking the Santa Monica Pier, the broad expanse of Piazza San Marco. Notice, in spite of the obvious functional services provided, that air of illusion with which such spaces are suffused. Their tendency to detach themselves from the rest of the world and to present themselves as sheer images. Notice the tendency to lose oneself, to become, as the critic A.O. Scott memorably put it, an instrument of pure perception. These are the effects for which we routinely invest the products of other art forms, painting, sculpture, literature, music, with value. That's what we care, that's why we do that stuff. Architecture, too, is an art, and its value accrues, to paraphrase Ruskin, not only in service to the human frame, but also in its effect on the human mind. If architects are to remain agents of cultural production, as well as organizers of everyday existence, we must remain committed not only to the coarse realities of utility, but also to crafting, out of the raw stuff with which we make buildings and cities, abstract images that fire both the public and the architectural imagination. Thank you.